The film Arrival is being called the top contender, or I guess the favorite, for the best picture Oscar so far this year. I've seen some pretty good films this year. I thought Hell or High Water was a good film until the ending, where it turned into just kind of more than it needed to be. I actually thought War Dogs is a pretty underrated film. I think Todd Phillips did a decent job of trying to parody. I call it a parody. Martin Scorsese, or at least trying to be Martin Scorsese. I call it a parody since, I mean, could you really take Todd Phillips seriously as trying to be a Martin Scorsese type of director? But I thought it was an entertaining film. What else? What else have I seen that I would call potential contenders? I saw Sully, which that was a pretty entertaining film. I didn't know that much about the history, so it entertained me. But so far, this fall season for films has been kind of light. I haven't been looking at all the indie stuff. There's always like 4 or 5 films you just don't hear about that become really great films. Happens every year. But there's not a whole lot, and so far this film Arrival seems to be, a lot of the Rotten Tomatoes quotes is this is the best film of the year so far. It's over 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's only 81 on Metacritic, but Metacritic's weird because Rotten Tomatoes, you either like a film or you don't. Giving a film a score is just kind of a weird thing. So, with it having 81 right now on Metacritic, I don't put too much thought into it. But these are critics that, for the most part, seem to really enjoy the film. And there's some discussion going on about this film. And the thing that's interesting about this is that as I was watching this, I was pretty there were I kind of felt like it was getting a little long. It was taking too long to get where we were going, because I mean, in any alien film, what's the purpose? To find out why you're there, why they're there, why the aliens are there. That's pretty much every film for the most part. Um, Anytime aliens invade, you want to know why they're here. That's what you want to know, and that'd be the first thing we'd want to know if aliens ever came to Earth, if that was possible. So there's times when it drags a little bit. It's actually a brilliantly directed film. They did a phenomenal job, and when you have a film where you need to keep it slow, but you also need to kind of speed things up when people are getting tired without skipping too far in advance. For example, when they start to really uncover the language, it kind of jumps up a little bit. They kind of go from knowing a couple of words. Basically it's a fucking montage. Is what they do. They do a montage where they learn the entire language, and there's just a few words that they're still confused about. And they did about as good a job as they could, and they just gave in and said, "Let's do a fucking montage," and whatever. So that's pretty much what happened with the learning of the language and how they kind of skipped ahead. So maybe they could have, some of those slower parts, they could have condensed those a little bit and stretched out the learning of the language a little bit better. I thought that the concept of the language, the way the words are written without, kind of out of order, not necessarily concerned about time, I thought that was brilliant. That's probably my favorite part of the film. I thought that was very clever. But going back to just kind of alien films in general, actually, no, let me do that in a moment. But my thought of the film as I was watching was, I was like, okay, this is good. I like this. And then when it was over, I thought, wow, that was powerful. That said a lot. This is something to think about. I really enjoy this. Yeah, this is probably going to win the Oscar for Best Picture. And my girlfriend, we were talking about it, and she had issues with it. She didn't enjoy it at all. She felt like there's no payoff. And I thought, well, no, there was a payoff. The payoff was the revelation. And then the more I started to think about it, the longer I started to think about this film, I started to realize there are a immeasurable number of plot holes that just completely, tear down whatever walls this film was building. And it's brutal when you start to kind of think about this. So I Googled and started reading what some other people were saying about this film, and man, there's people who really think this is a brilliant film. And one of the things that happens when you have something that's convoluted, such as this film, and I'll explain why it's convoluted in a moment, but people who love something, sometimes people think that a film is smarter than they are. Believe it or not, it's just a film. And a writer isn't necessarily a great writer. There's a lot of films that get made where the writing is atrocious, absolutely horrible. Most films are like that. Most films are very poorly written. And you shouldn't just think just because something's on the screen and you're watching something that it's intelligent. Even if it looks and sounds intelligent, such as this film, because there's usually a pretty big difference between a writer and a director, even if they're the same person. You could be a great writer and a shitty director. You could be a great director and a shitty writer. And I'm not saying that this is a poorly written film. I'm saying that they're trying to do something. They're trying to do more than they should have done. The story should have been simpler. There's a couple of films that this reminds me of. The first one is Looper, which is a phenomenal film. Absolutely brilliant film. I love Looper. But to me, if you take out the kid who had the magic powers, you have a better film. You didn't need that. You could have actually just, done away with that and still had an incredible film. Go back and watch Looper and think about it and try to and as you're watching it, think about what that kid brings to the film. He brings too much to the film. The way that they do time travel is phenomenal, and it works, and it's what should be the focus. But this kid, he kind of exists outside that narrative, and it's just not necessary. You know, the way of explaining something just to make everything else confusing. Fucking Attack of the Clones, Cypher Dyas, where George Lucas didn't know how to really come up with the clones and get a clone army and still have it a mystery, so he created a character out of thin air that would be dead, where you don't have to explain anything. He needed something to get done. He couldn't think of an intelligent way to do it, so he just created something out of thin air. These are all ideas that Arrival seems to value, and some of this just flat out doesn't make sense. But you have people that'll watch a film and they'll think it's intelligent just because it's on a huge screen and it makes millions of dollars and everybody who worked on it's filthy rich. But you don't have to think that way. You can be smarter than this stuff. You don't have to. And the thing that bothers me is when people, they add to it. The Bible's a great example. The Bible will tell you, there's a story in the Bible about how 42 children were mocking a bald-headed man, and then God summoned 2 bears to maul the children. It's a horrifying story. If you were to worship that God, you'd be kind of a dick, would you not? You would. But people will add to it with just a simple. It's a very 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 short part of the Bible. It's only a few sentences, I think. But people will sit there and rationalize it. They'll start to add to it. And someone, you can look this up on Google. Some guy said, "Well, children, no, those were rebels." The words can be different, but they were rebels. They were probably in their 20s, and blah blah blah, and they were evil and all. It's just ridiculous stuff. People will rationalize, and there's a very long explanation. I don't have the link in front of me, but I read it earlier. But you can Google it. I think I Googled "Arrival makes no sense," and this is one of the articles that came up. Is on some geek website. I think they had Dork or Geek or something in the URL. You can find it. I'll post it in the description after I publish this, if I can find it again. But this was a guy that was saying that the film was brilliant, and he was filling in so many blanks. But these weren't blanks intentionally left by the film for you to fill in. If you think about something like The Shining. The Shining is a film that you can interpret. This Arrival, this is not an interpretive film. Is that the right word? I don't even care. This is not a film you're supposed to interpret. This isn't a film that, it's not Pulp Fiction where you're supposed to, what's in the briefcase? Where ultimately Tarantino probably just didn't have anything. He said, well, let's just do it this way because this will be cool. And people will assume it's something great. Whatever I say it is couldn't be as great as what people's imaginations will think of. But this is not a film you can interpret. There's nothing to interpret here. It's very black and white. It's very by the numbers in its execution. There are no mysteries. At the end of this film that Amy Adams is still going to fucking marry Jeremy Renner, and they're still going to have a kid, and she's still going to die of cancer, which we obviously assume it is. Probably brain cancer, we assume. And that's probably what's going to happen. It's there's no indication that she may try to change the future, because that's not even what the film is about. I don't even know what this film is about. Let me tell you what I think the film should have been about and what I thought it was going to be about. So, early on, this appears to be a film about the implications of bad communication. We have Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner trying to communicate with the aliens. Not doing so well early on. We have other countries using their languages and their way of speaking, which, if you know anything about Japanese, they construct their sentences very differently from how we do. I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't some sort of inspiration. Those kind of thoughts. And they start to misinterpret the aliens. I thought where this was heading was the countries not communicating with each other properly and not communicating with aliens. I thought the Russians and the Chinese were going to attack the aliens and destroy their ships, and then the others would leave. I didn't think there would be retaliation. I didn't think it was going to be a big war. I think that could have been interesting too, but I thought the other aliens would leave, and I think that what would happen is we would have almost a revelation. Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner would be very close to cracking something massive. Just something on a massive scale. Contact, when they figure out that, when they have the blueprints and they figure out that you have to arrange them three-dimensionally, that's an incredible revelation. Something along those lines. I'm not saying it's a spaceship or a weapon or something, but that's the kind of revelation where when you're watching that film, you're like, holy shit, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. That idea where they couldn't figure out how to connect them together and it was three-dimensional. Absolutely brilliant. Brilliant. Now, obviously, at the end where Jodie Foster goes to the fantasy island with the father and everything, that's kind of weird, and I just don't think they could come up with a good payoff. But it's okay because it probably didn't happen, so who knows. But that's what I was hoping was going to happen. That's what I kind of saw. And maybe some of my disappointment is that I was wrong. But, the thing is that there's pieces of this film that just don't seem to fit. The first problem that really crops up is the daughter stuff. That's something that feels like, kind of in Looper, the kid with the magic, it feels like it doesn't need to be there. Why is it there? And people are trying to rationalize why it's there. But there is no rationalization. Early on, Amy Adams is depressed. You can tell that she's depressed. She appears to be mourning the death of her daughter, the loss of her husband. It's not clear why he's not there. She's wearing a wedding ring, which that's going to lead you to believe that he died. So now she's doubly depressed. It wasn't a divorce. He's dead. The daughter's gone. She's not acting. She's not acting super depressed, but she's not acting happy either. And they're doing this as misdirection to try to make you think she's depressed because her daughter died. They don't want you to know that the daughter hasn't even been born yet. You don't find that out until later. That's the big twist in all of this. The big reveal, the big twist is that the daughter hasn't been born yet. All of this is happening, down the road. She's just having visions about it. That's the twist. And the problem with that I have with this film, more so than anything else, is that we don't need that. We don't need that aspect. It essentially makes the aliens pointless to a certain extent. I mean, think about it. She was having these predictions before the aliens got there. She was seeing the future. What's the point of the aliens being there? Because the thought is that, okay, they teach her this language. And the way the language works is that they write in these circles. And the words are just kind of in there. There's no beginning or end to it. It's a circle. Circle has no beginning or no end. Technically it does, because when you draw it, you have to start somewhere. And when you stop drawing it, you have to end somewhere. Even if you overtrace it, there is a beginning and an end. But you know what I'm saying. And they just throw the words in randomly, and you have to kind of figure out what it is. Thought that was interesting, but how this unlocks her the ability to see into the future, I have no clue. And if that's the case, why the fuck can't Jeremy Renner see into the future? Because he kind of cracks the final code. So why is he not seeing into the future? Why is it only her? And why is she able to do this before she even knows aliens are there? None of it makes any sense. She always had the ability to see into the future. Then why are the aliens even there in the first place? Because she could predict all this. The aliens are there. Their whole purpose of being there is to give them the gift of their language so that they can help them in 3,000 years. There's Sifo-Dyas right there. I don't need to explain anything. I'm just going to throw something out there because I need to have a reason to have something. They got to be here for a reason. Why the fuck are they here? I don't know. Let's say they need help. Because then we don't have to explain it. Sifo-Dyas is dead. We don't need to explain him. He's dead. He's gone. Who cares? Who cares about speculation? So they're there because they're going to need the humans' help in 3,000 years. First of all, why the fuck is it 3,000 years? Why isn't it 10, 15 years? And how is giving them the gift of this language going to help you? If seeing into the, first of all, they can see into the future if they need help in 3,000 years. And if they can see into the future, that would probably mean that they know the humans are going to help them. So everything that transpires they can predict. So now the question becomes, why do they need to send out 12 of these spacecraft? If they can see into the future, which I think even in the film, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they say they couldn't? I thought she said, how do you see into the future? They said, no, you see into the future. But if you know you need help in 3,000 years, now maybe on their planet, they did some research and found out, well, in 3,000 years we're going to be fucked. Maybe they didn't have to see into the future. But if that's the case, you need to explain that. This, and again, you're probably saying, wait a minute. Isn't this the whole it's open to interpretation kind of thing? No, that's something that needs to be explained. Okay, again, because we're talking about Sifo-Dyas from fucking Attack of the Clones. You can't just say something and then get away with it. You need to. There's some things that have to be explained. It needs to be explained why they came 3,000 years earlier. And again, if you've got 3,000 years, you need help. Maybe you're going to run out of resources. Maybe spend the next 3,000 years finding more resources or whatever. Then you have the fact that Amy Adams, even after knowing that she is going to marry Jeremy Renner, and he's going to end up hating her probably. They're going to have a daughter. I just yawned, sorry about that. Their daughter's going to die of cancer. Apparently her and Jeremy don't end up on very good terms because he's in none of the visions after they're divorced. She's still going to marry him knowing that he's going to end up hating her. She's still going to have a child with him that she knows is going to die of cancer. I cannot think of a decent human who would go through with that. If nothing else, you try to improve your odds. You find a surrogate. You get a sperm donor. You I don't know, you change your diet. I don't know, you do something. And maybe she thinks that's going to happen. Maybe she thinks everything's going to be okay. So maybe it's like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where they know they're going to break up. Like, fuck it, let's get back together. Because there is that thought, we can make it work this time. But this is fucking cancer we're talking about. And it's something that she seems to have accepted is going to happen. And hey, maybe she is going to try something different. But we don't know. We can't assume that. Nothing's given to us to allow us to assume that. Again, this is a very, very clear picture that this film has drawn for us. Yes, it's convoluted. Yes, it's confusing. Yes, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But it's still telling you this is what happened, and that's just the way it's going to be. Again, we could come to the conclusion that she's going to try something different. We could come to that conclusion, but what do we see at the end? Let's make a baby, Jeremy Renner says. He says, let's make a baby, and they probably make a baby. That's it. That's what we fucking get. What should have happened is, first of all, there's a really horrible bit of editing that goes on, because she's hugging him after the aliens leave, and you hear him say, let's make a baby. It sounds like this is before they had any intimacy whatsoever. This was just their first fucking hug. At this point, he doesn't know they're getting together. And it sounds like he just ran up to her at the end of the film after the aliens left, after everything's okay, gave her a hug and said, let's make a baby. That's what it sounds like. Then you're like, wait, what the fuck? And then it cuts to them in the future. I also have a problem with Amy Adams' selective memory of the future. This is done to throw off the viewers. As an example, she has a memory of her putting out the book of the language. We're not exactly sure why. Most likely it's done so that future generations can help out these aliens when they come back in 3,000 years. And yet, there are no memories of her speaking with the aliens, learning language. You would think that that'd be one of the best things to do, to have in your memory. Your future memory is you learning the language, so you don't have to actually do it. That'd have been very helpful. I thought the stuff with calling the Chinese guy, I forget his name, but calling him that, I mean, that was like, let's add some drama, let's add some excitement. And it just came across as very hokey and very silly, and again, kind of out of place. That's what a lot of this film feels like. It feels like what it should have been. I keep yawning, it's very late for me. I'm an old man, I can't stay up this late. It's 9 o'clock, I'm fucking tired, it's embarrassing. But, it felt like this was going to be a social commentary on the importance of communication, which is great for an alien film. It's a great concept, fantastic. But in the end, it wasn't. What was this movie about? Maybe it's about a lot of things. Maybe it's about absolutely nothing. But this is a very, very difficult film to figure out, even though it's very easy to figure out. I kind of wonder, where is this film going to rate at the end of the year? This is kind of a soft year for great films. I've seen most of the films that have been considered very good. Of those, I would probably say my favorite so far was Hell or High Water, which was an okay film. It's another film that I think tried to be bigger than it needed to be. It should have been a smaller film. There's some greatness to that film, make no mistake about it, but the big shootouts at the end and stuff, that was a little much. I didn't believe that brother would have, gone out like that. I don't believe it. Not in a second. It was a pretty entertaining film. Definitely better than Arrival. And Arrival's not a bad film. If you shut your brain off or you try to overthink, you're fine. But if you sit in the middle, if you just take the film for what it is, you're gonna have a hard time. It could be very frustrating. It's a very well made film. Last thing I'll say that's kind of strange is that Forrest Whitaker, when he first appears on camera, and maybe my ears weren't working so well, but it seemed like he had an accent. And then his accent kept changing. It almost seemed like he got tired of doing the accent, so he just stopped by the end of the film, even though they don't usually film, a movie, in chronological order. It goes out of order. They may have shot the last scene first, but I thought it was funny that his accent, he didn't seem to know what kind of accent that he wanted to do. So that's my review of Arrival. I snorted there for a second. I'm so tired. I wasn't gonna do this. I don't know if anybody will ever make it this far into this review. It's really just sort of, for me, it's I'm curious kind of where it goes, because I think this is going to be a talked about film. We talked about Contact for a long time. We're still talking about Contact. There's still the debate on whether or not what happened really happened. I think I want to say the writer of the film said it didn't happen. But it's still interpretive. You could still, no matter what the writer says, if it's not on, it's sort of like expanded universe Star Wars. If it didn't happen in a film, who gives a shit if it's on the web? All these people talking about all these Siths that were written about in video games and novels. It's like, no, those aren't going to show up in the films. If it wasn't in the film, it didn't happen. So even if something's ambiguous, even if something is to be interpreted, if it's not on the film, it's not canon. If it's not in the film, it's not canon. So there's elements to this film that are canon. There's elements to this film that are not canon because they simply were not explained, such as, the 3,000 year thing. It's absolutely confusing. None of it makes any sense. Some people would say that with, the aliens had to find Amy Adams. They were looking for her. But why didn't they land closer? I don't know where she was at the start, but they had to fly her to the location. Kind of reminded me of Signs. Remember Signs? Signs was a pretty good little movie until the end, until the whole swing away thing. That was a pretty good movie. That was really like the first time M. Night Shyamalan just lost it. That was like his first "I'm done" moment. And as I see this picture of the big seed style of ship, it makes you wonder: is that symbolic? Is any of this? Maybe this is a deep movie. Maybe it is. Maybe the people who are looking into this, looking too deep into this, maybe there's something there, but there are no hints. Some people were quoting Neil deGrasse Tyson and talking about his ideas of the way time works. I'm like, no, no, no. It does. None of that matters. None of that, because those aren't scientific theories. Those are, when it comes to time, we're kind of in the dark on it, because people will say it's not linear, but I mean, come on, it is linear. It's linear in the way that we see it. Maybe it's not linear, but the way we're seeing it is linear. And I don't believe that this film tries to derail those thoughts. I don't think it's trying to be any smarter than what's written, on the pages. But maybe it is. The problem is that we don't know. You can sit there and overanalyze it all you want, but you're going to have to do just like people do with the Bible, where you're going to have to fill in the blanks, even if the blanks aren't in there. That's the only way you can rationalize this. If we're going to debate this film, we have to talk about what's on the film. We can't sit there and assume something. We can't sit there and say, well, they were thinking this, or this is why this happened, or this is why this happened. You can only talk about what's in the film. You can only talk about what's on the pages of the Bible. So Arrival, it's a film I'll probably watch again. Probably just once. It's not that entertaining of a film where I think I could watch it more than once or twice. It's oh man, it's a film that gets you thinking. And whether you agree with me or not, I think the fact that we can have these debates, as long as you're willing to just debate what's on the film, can be very entertaining. But we can't sit here and talk about something and assume something that didn't happen. And this little mini review is drawn on far too long. I'm sorry, I'm just rambling. This is what happens when I get tired. Would I recommend this film? I wouldn't recommend it to you if you've listened to this, because I've obviously spoiled the whole fucking movie for you, so I'm sorry about that. But I would recommend this film to anyone who wants to have their head messed with. I would love to hear what they have to say about it. So if anybody ever listens to this and you have different thoughts than I do, I would love to hear them. Email me or whatever, let me know, because I'm curious. Did I miss something? What did I miss? But just remember, if you want to have a discussion with me, it's got to be in the film. You can't assume something. And that's pretty much it as far as when it comes to me and discussing something with a person. As long as they're willing to debate what's actually on the screen, I love a good argument.